All right, Larry Kruger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little review of Saturday's NFL action. Why don't we start with the second game, because Kansas City has just taken apart the Miami Dolphins at Arrowhead 26-7 as the Chiefs move on to the next round and the Dolphins season comes to an end. Patrick Mahomes goes to a 10-2 in home playoff games, and he had a good day. He threw 43 times. He threw for 262 yards and a touchdown. He avoided big mistakes. He avoided interceptions. He wasn't sacked at all on the day. Tua Tagovailoa did throw the one interception. The Chiefs had a really nice day running the ball. 24 carries for 89 yards, 100 for Isaiah Pacheco. Kansas City ran for over 4 yards a carry. They ran 34 times for 147 yards, and they held the Dolphins running attack to just 76 yards on a cold night. Tyreek Hill did have the 53-yard touchdown. He had 5 catches for 62 yards and a touchdown. Rashee Rice, though, really was the story for Kansas City, as they needed some receiver to step up. Travis Kelce caught 7 balls for 71 yards, but it was Rashee Rice who caught 8 balls for 130 yards and a touchdown. They targeted those guys 22 times. So, you look at Kansas City, they don't have great receivers. They didn't get anything out of their other receivers. Marquez Valdez-Scantling got 1 catch. Justin Watson caught 2 balls. Richie James caught 1. McCole Hardman caught a ball. But it was Travis Kelce and maybe most specifically Rashee Rice who stepped up. And Chiefs get the win. They also get a 10-tackle day out of Nick Bolton, 1.5 sacks out of Karlaftis. And Kansas City gets a half sack and a couple quarterback hits out of Chris Jones. Dolphins fought. This game was a hard-fought game. It wasn't, just simply, a one-sided game. Rashee Rice scored early on an 11-yard pass from Mahomes to make it 7-0. And then Butker kicked a field goal to make it 10-0. Tyreek Hill had that 53-yard score from Tua to make it 10-7. This is all in the second quarter. Butker with another field goal to make it 13-7. And then Butker with another field goal to make it 16-7 going into the dressing room. So it was 16-7 Chiefs at the half. And then Kansas City, took over in the second half as well. Butker with another field goal. And then Pacheco put the icing on top with a 3-yard run to make it 26-7. Kansas City's offense still does not look very explosive, but they find a way to get it done. They do just enough offensively, and they get the win over Miami in record low temperatures. Mahomes throws for 262 yards and a touchdown. We actually saw his helmet shattered in the game. He took a big hit in the second half, and you never see that. I wonder if that has anything to do with the weather itself. But you look at Mahomes, to me, the key guy was Rashee Rice. He hit Rice 8 times for 130 yards and a touchdown. And then what can you say? Butker was, he's a good field goal kicker. He kicked 4 field goals. And the Dolphins, who were really beat up by injuries, they didn't look anything like the dynamic offense that led the league in yards during the regular season. You saw Tua under pressure constantly from the NFL's number 2 ranked defense. And other than Tyreek Hill having that 153-yard touchdown catch, Kansas City did a nice job of shutting him down. Dolphins finished with just 264 yards in total. And they haven't won at Arrowhead since November the 6th of 2011. And they haven't won a playoff game, the Dolphins haven't, since December of 2000. So it's been a while. And so the Chiefs win their 15th consecutive home playoff game. And when you think about all the winning they have done in the postseason, they're now going to head to Buffalo next week if the Bills beat the Steelers on Monday in a game, of course, pushed back by the blizzard. Otherwise, the Chiefs will host Houston, which beat the Browns earlier Sunday. So there you go. I would love to see the Texans come in to Arrowhead to take on Kansas City. I think that would be a hell of a game. It was minus 4 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 20 Celsius at kickoff, easily setting the record for the coldest game at Arrowhead Stadium history. You had wind gusts going 25 miles an hour. You had the wind chill at minus 27. I mean, it just absolutely looked miserable out there, and the Chiefs figure out a way to get it done. And Kansas City, I don't know how Kansas City's going to do all the way through, but they were good enough to win today. And there were some injuries, of course. Javon Holland and Xavier Howard were inactive for Miami. That only added to things. No Jerome Baker, no Van Ginkel, no Jalen Phillips. Miami's just injury depleted. Deshaun Elliott, their defensive back, left in the fourth quarter with a calf injury. So the Dolphins season comes to an end, and Kansas City is moving on. So that was game number 2, and it was a really exciting game to watch. Now let's talk a little bit about game number 1, because game number 1 was really an amazing story, and that was the Houston Texans find a way to knock off the Cleveland Browns. The Browns were favored, and the Texans scored first on a 21-yard field goal by Fairbairn to make it 3-0. And then Kareem Hunt scored the first of his 2 touchdowns to make it 7-3 Cleveland. But Stroud answered on hitting Nico Collins for a 15-yard score in the first half to make it 10-7 Houston. Flacco then threw an 11-yard touchdown pass to Kareem Hunt for his second touchdown, and they jump back on top 14-10. But then Houston responded as Stroud hit Brevin Jordan on a 76-yard touchdown. The former Miami Hurricane got loose for a big play there. It gave Houston a 17-14 lead, and they would never look back from there. C.J. Stroud hit Dalton Schultz with a 37-yarder to end the first half, 24-14. And you looked at that first half, and you thought, man, is anybody but Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah going to even show up for the Browns on defense? Koramoah had 7 tackles, all solo, 3 tackles for loss. He was absolutely fantastic. But just too much C.J. Stroud. I mean, 11 of 16 for 236 and 3 touchdowns in the first half alone. Nico Collins is absolutely a monster. He had 4 catches for 81 yards and a touchdown in the first half. Jordan had the 76-yard touchdown. Schultz had a 37-yard touchdown. Devin Singletary in the first half averaged 5.3 yards per carry. And Flacco's numbers were good in that first half. He was 14 of 17 for 172 yards and a touchdown, and Houston was up 24-14 at halftime. Cleveland's defense, which gave up 173 yards on average this year, got torched by Houston's offense. And Cleveland also, only could average about 2.7 yards per carry because Houston's defense was fantastic in the box. Desmond King and Denzel Perriman both were outstanding against the run. You could tell that Amari Cooper was not 100% healthy. And then one factor that really was a key factor in this game for the Texans was their defensive ends. Jonathan Greenard, who goes about 6'3", 260, the former star at Florida, who's now 26. He totally dominated the Cleveland tackles. Will Anderson, Derek Barnett. Greenard had 12 and a half sacks in the season, and he looked great in this game. And then Barnett looked like, he was dialing back the fountain of youth. Will Anderson playing like a veteran. And those 3 defensive ends absolutely were the biggest factor, I thought, in the game. Kareem Hunt had the 2 touchdowns, and he's just a really good running back. But, man, when you got to the second half, you're thinking, okay, it's Cleveland's time. If they're going to jump up, they're going to have to jump up and do it right now. And sure enough, Joe Flacco in the third quarter throws he was pressured by Derek Barnett, and it forced him to throw a ball that Steven Nelson took back for a pick 6 to make it 31-14 Houston. And then the next series, Christian Harris put tons of heat on Flacco, and he throws his second pick 6 and to make it 38-14. And then Christian Harris makes another play, on the turnover on downs on 4th down. He was fantastic. Christian Harris was absolutely the man in this game. And then Devin Singletary had a fourth quarter touchdown run to make it 45-14. And that's how that thing ended, 45-14. the Texans beat the Cleveland Browns. And I'll tell you, that right there makes you pause. I mean, for CJ Stroud as a rookie quarterback, even at home, to lead an offense to 45 points against the number one defense in the NFL, it makes you wonder if this young Houston Texan team with D'Amico Ryans is in charge might be able to do the unthinkable and put together a deep playoff run. I mean, look at what they have. CJ Stroud at quarterback. Singletary ran for over 5 yards a carry. So he's absolutely looking terrific. And then Nico Collins, 6 catches for 96 yards. He's just a monster. He reminds me a little bit of a young Terrell Owens. Brevin Jordan is a movement tight end who can obviously move. He had a 76-yard touchdown. John Mechie, Dalton Schultz, Xavier Hutchinson, Robert Woods. I mean, Noah Brown went down with an injury, and they don't have Tank Dell, and it was like they didn't even miss him. I mean, it was really impressive. And then Desmond King, cut earlier this year by the Steelers, and Houston picks him up. 12 tackles, 7 of them solo. The former Iowa star can really play football. Blake Cashman had 10 tackles, 6 solo. Christian Harris, though, 8 tackles, 7 solo, 1 sack, 2 tackles for a loss, a pass defense, the quarterback hit, an interception. Christian Harris had one of the greatest games I think I've ever seen. I mean, he was absolutely everywhere. If you look at the box score, you'll see that Jonathan Greenard, was credited with no tackles and no sacks and 1 hit on the quarterback. He had the most impactful no tackle game I think I've ever seen. The guy was totally beating his man on every play. He was in the backfield. He was forcing others to make plays. He was spilling the ball back inside. So Houston's legit. I mean, Houston's got a great young quarterback in Stroud, and they've got passing weapons. They've got a good running back. They've got, an unbelievable collection of defensive ends, and they've got some guys on the back end that have talent. You think about Derek Stingley Jr. He's a really good football player, in their secondary. So, I mean, Steven Nelson had a big interception in this game. They're better. They're better than you think. So, I watch out for the Texans. I mean, nobody's going to want to play the Texans because they are right now looking really, really dangerous. I mean, and then the CJ Stroud, story just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. He becomes the youngest quarterback to win a playoff game, and did it with an impressive fashion. This guy's 22 years and 102 days old, and he passes Michael Vick, who was 22 years, 192 days old in 2002 when the Falcons beat the Packers at Lambeau. So unbelievable. Stroud is fantastic, and he's got weapons. He's got a good young defense. They got a ton of enthusiasm. And it's incredible. Now, Joe Flacco, who's 38 years old, he'll be 39 on Tuesday. He went 4-1 as a starter down the stretch, and he led the Browns to their 3rd playoff appearance since '99. But he just had a bad day. I mean, it was his 17th postseason game, but his first in 9 years, and he just couldn't keep it going. He finished with 307 yards and a touchdown pass in the first half, but his mistakes under pressure in the 3rd quarter were the difference in this ball game for sure. And CJ Stroud outshined Flacco. And I'll say this, and it has to be mentioned, we talked endlessly about the Dallas Cowboys, of the 90s and how they were fueled by the Herschel Walker trade. And there's no question about it. Look at how the Texans handled the Deshaun Watson trade from the Browns. And that trade absolutely created the momentum that they have, and the momentum that they will have going forward as a young up-and-coming team in the AFC under D'Amico Ryans. For Deshaun Watson, the Texans received for moving Sean Watson Will Anderson, Tank Dell, who's their best young receiver, didn't even play tonight. John Mechie, another good young receiver. Christian Harris, maybe the best player on the field today, dominant linebacker out of Alabama. Damian Pierce, an every down running back. Kenyon Green, a big monster offensive lineman from Texas A&M. A first-round pick in next year's draft. A third-round pick in next year's draft. Xavier Hutchinson, the former Iowa State wide receiver. Thomas Booker, and Brandon Hill, the safety from Pitt, who's a big-time player. He's not a great runner, but he's a good football player. That is a ton for Deshaun Watson. The Browns paid Deshaun Watson $230 million guaranteed, and now are leaning on Flacco after Watson had a really down year. But the Texans pivot from Deshaun, and they go from Deshaun to C.J. Stroud and turn Deshaun into an absolute bounty, which they haven't even fully realized yet. I mean, we're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 players, and they've got 2 more picks, including a first-round pick in the upcoming draft for Deshaun still coming. The Texans, D'Amico's a great coach. C.J. Stroud is a fantastic young quarterback. But if there's one narrative that has to be told, it's that the way they pivoted and got out of Deshaun Watson and what they got in return is absolutely fueling their ascension in the AFC. An amazing trade that moved Deshaun to Cleveland and an abundance of riches to the Houston Texans. All right, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Underdog Fantasy. Check that link in the description. And Mojo Fantasy, check that link in the description. Use the promo code Krug, K-R-U-E-G, and they'll match you on either side up to your first $100. And thanks to all you guys for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.